What is up, everybody? Happy Wednesday. Welcome back. We're live with Coach Morgan here. To compound or to isolate? That is the question of the day today. I've been sort of coming up with some new topics, some new things that I figured would be important to discuss. And this is one of those things that popped up recently around programming, as I was having a conversation with a coach that I mentor about her programming, and we were discussing the different movement patterns and everything that way. And so I think this is an important one for not only coaches but also for clients to understand, as far as what to do when you are training, what to do when you are exercising, going through your routine, and understanding the difference with compound exercises, isolation exercises, and why to choose either. Why to choose one over the other. So just to start off with compound or isolation, right? Compound, more thinking multi-joints, like a squat, a deadlift, versus isolation is like, throw out a traditional exercise like a bicep curl, right? You're isolating a singular muscle versus compound, you are utilizing multi-joint, multi-muscle movement patterns. So that is just the very, very basics of this. But when it comes to your actual routine, right? Now, if you work with a coach, then hopefully they have done some form of assessment specific to what you need and your body to get a gauge as far as how your body moves, where you have some limitations, where there's some things that maybe need to be addressed. But if you don't work with a coach, that is fine too, because you can also work through some things yourself to get an understanding, right? So I'm going to start just kind of precursor to the actual discussion about what to do, compound or isolation, so that if you are an individual and you're training on your own, maybe you don't have a coach, you're just going to the gym, then you can start to piece some of this together for yourself. I always recommend if you're starting off or you're unsure, obviously reach out to a professional, a fitness professional, and get some guidance on what direction to take based on the needs of your body and your goals. But if you are someone that just goes to the gym on their own and is just kind of feeling a little stuck or unsure, let's just start here. So before we dive into what you should do from a compound or isolation standpoint, let's understand just some basics, movement patterns to assess for yourself. So one of the simple starting points to look at is a toe touch. Can you stand tall, reach down for the floor? This is going to give you insight into a multitude of things, but very basically a forward fold, a similar hinge pattern of your body, and seeing if you have some limitations through the posterior chain, through midline control, etc. So if you have some limitation there, then that might give you some insight into what type of potential compound movements to do, maybe also what type of isolation movements to do. So just for an example, if I had someone that did a toe touch and they couldn't reach the floor, right? They couldn't reach the floor. They could maybe only get down to just below their knees. If I was to be programming a deadlift pattern with them, I might start them at a height in which they could toe touch or reach down to. So that would mean just below the knees for that person, right? So I might start if they were to do an actual bilateral deadlift, then they might be starting from just below the knees. And then as we continue to work on their mobility, as we continue to build up resiliency and strength in their patterns and tension in their patterns, then we would start to increase that range of motion. That is just a very general answer on that. Another thing that I like to look at is a single leg step up, right? So if you're unsure about like, should I be squatting or should I be lunging or should I be, doing single leg deadlifts or whatever, right? If you're unsure about kind of, let's say, lower body exercise, then I like to look at single leg step ups. So do a single leg step up onto a box. Set up a box that is knee height for you, and then perform anywhere from 5 to 10 step ups per leg, where you are controlled the whole time, driving through that top leg, and your movement pattern is slower on the way down than it is on the way up. And see side to side what it feels like for you. Do you have the same output side to side? Now, a lot of people don't. And this is something that we see often when we do our initial assessments with clients in our facilities, where a lot of people have an imbalance, a strength imbalance side to side, where maybe their right leg if we're saying we're aiming for 10 reps on each leg, let's just say, maybe on the right leg, they can knock out 10, really controlled, smooth, no deviations, really nice and clean. But then on their left leg, they can get to about 6 before it starts to become, a challenge for them to hold position. They start to lose the control on the way down. They start to have a hip shift, and things start to happen. So what does that tell us? That tells us that, hey, we got some strength imbalances that we need to address, right? That left leg and that right leg don't have the same output right now. And so that then can direct us towards what are we going to focus on when we first start getting into some training? Well, someone that doesn't have the same output left leg to right leg, I'm not going to throw them under a barbell and start just loading up some squats because they don't have the same output in a flexion pattern, left leg to right leg. Now, it doesn't mean they won't squat, but their primary strength work, and if you are someone that's like this, if you go test this out for yourself, you don't have a coach and you're just testing this out for yourself, and you identify that, oh yeah, I do have a discrepancy side to side, then do single leg work as your primary strength work to start off with. Do some isolation work as your primary thing. Now, that isolation work could mean isolation side to side muscularly, or it could be a compound movement, but side to side as well, right? So this is where that to compound or to isolate kind of starts to play in as far as what you look at. So if I found that someone had a discrepancy side to side in their step up, then I want to start to mitigate that discrepancy. I want to start to close that gap. So I might have some compound single leg movement patterns that they're doing. And then through that process as well, I'm wanting to identify where are they able to find and hold tension in that pattern, right? Are they able to hold and find their hamstrings? Are they able to find their glutes? Are they able to, connect with their quads? Whatever the pattern is, whatever the movement is, are they able to hold tension there? And anyone that's heard me speak before knows I preach tension over position, meaning I care about you being able to hold tension in a movement pattern. I don't care about you just being able to do the pattern. So if we start to see that, we're not even able to feel this area, then I might throw in some isolation exercises associated with that. So for a lot of people, they can really lock in on their quads and they get a good connection with their quads, but they don't have a good connection with their hamstrings. So if they had that isolate or they had a discrepancy side to side in their leg, I might do a compound single leg exercise, Bulgarian split squat, everyone's favorite, reverse lunge, something that is maybe more compound single leg exercise. And I might incorporate some, hamstring work, maybe some hamstring holds, like contraction holds with a band or machine if you have it. A medicine ball, right? So I might do some specific isometric work, some specific slow eccentric work to really start to gain some connection to the tissues that they aren't able to connect to right now. And then over time, progressively build from there. And in that programming, in that same breath, they might have some form of bilateral squatting, like a goblet squat in there. However, I'm not going to load that really high. I'm going to put the challenge on the tempo and the control of position for a bilateral squat. So I literally have clients doing this right now in their programming where their main strength piece is unilateral lunges, Bulgarian split squats, single leg deadlifts. And then they have accessory strength work where they're doing tempo slow goblet squats. They're doing isometric or tempo-based eccentric hamstring work, glute work, tib-ant work, quad work, right? Whatever the thing is that they need to do to start to create deeper connection to those tissues so that we can eventually, if their goal and their desire is to do some squatting, and that's something that we're looking to do, then as we build up, we retest. Hint, hint, you should always be retesting. And we start to see that discrepancy that we had at the start on that step up, 10 right leg, 6 left, now becomes, 10 right leg and 8 or 9 left, right? They're very similar now, right? We have a little discrepancy on that left still, but we're very much more similar after a cycle of doing a compound unilateral movement. So I know that doesn't really say to do one or the other, because I'm never going to say that, right? To compound or to isolate. I put that in there just as a funny kind of starting point. But that is the thing that you need to think about. Whether you have a coach or you do this yourself in the gym, you need to assess something. You need to look at something and see where are you currently at. If we were looking at upper body, one of the basic go-tos that I have is a single arm shoulder press. Okay, are we able to perform the same amount of reps and load one arm to the other? There is some correlation to other movements that we can connect the dots on, like what are we able to pull, right? A pull-up or a pulling variation, and how that connects to our ability to shoulder press or shoulder high pull. There are some connections there. I'm not going to get into that today. But these are the things that if you are training on your own, right, and you wanting to see some change and some results and some progress forward, then you need to do some basic little assessments to start off with so that you have an understanding of how your body's working, where you have some discrepancies in your musculature and your ability to hold tension and feel those tissues in those areas. And then that can guide you toward what type of compound movements to do, what type of isolation movements to do, when to do them. Now, my all-encompassing sort of final thoughts on this would be majority of the time, people need to do more unilateral movement patterns, right? They could be compound, they could be isolation patterns, but more often than not, we need to do more unilateral based or challenging in a split stance kind of standpoint, half kneeling standpoint, things like that. We need to challenge that a little bit more. We get too caught up in bilateral stances and bilateral movement patterns. So spend more time in half kneeling, spend more time in split stances, spend more time in rotation-based exercise, and then start to incorporate some of your bilateral stuff after that, be it compound movement patterns, your squatting, your traditional deadlifting, your traditional barbell pressing, etc. All right, so I hope that helps you understand to compound or to isolate. There is no real correct answer on it, depending on what your goals are. It's a matter of thinking isolation for me is like I need to direct their focus and attention to connecting tension to specific tissues. And then compound stuff for me is like, okay, if they have the competency side to side and no discrepancies between right and left leg, right and left arm, then we might do some bilateral compound, or if they do, then we might do more unilateral compound exercises. So hope that gives you some insight, something to think about with your training. If you're unsure about where to start and you're like, okay, I've done these tests, I've done some of these things, but I'm still kind of lost with what exactly to do, fire me a DM, let me know. I'm more than happy always to help and sort of point you in the direction as far as some things to do for yourself so that you can continue to work towards your goals. And our entire team is here to help as well. So by all means, ask us questions, let us know, and then we can go from there, get you on the roll to reaching your goals. So have a fantastic day, everybody. Function better.